Okay, guys, so I'm really excited to share with you Zach Latta. I've known him for a couple years now. He's a really cool guy, and he always seems to amaze me with the things that he does. So, Zach, why don't you tell us a little about your background, what you've done, where you're at now, and how you got there?
Yeah, well, I first and foremost, I appreciate the kind words. So a little bit of background on me. I love programming. So I got started at a pretty early age. I got my first job in high school where I worked at a game studio, and that was just amazing. Then I left high school when I was 16, and I moved up from Los Angeles to San Francisco to work at a company. And now I moved on from that, and I'm running a nonprofit called Hack Club that works with high schoolers to start awesome after-school coding clubs.
Awesome. Can you go into a little more detail in terms of like the apps that you worked on, Hack Club, and just leaving high school in general? How did that all work out?
Yeah. So like a specific app that I worked on or something like that.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little about Football Heroes or Yo?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'll start with Football Heroes. That first job I got at a game studio, I worked on this game called Football Heroes. I was like the first hire that wasn't a founder, and we to give some background on Football Heroes itself. So it's like an arcade football game. The idea is like traditionally you have something like Madden, which is a fun football game on your TV screen or on your phone. And with Football Heroes, we did that exact same thing, except we gave all of the players in the game superpowers. So instead of going to tackle someone, you might, I don't know, summon a meteorite and blow up half the field and then use that to your advantage to score a touchdown. So it was a really fun game to work on because the team I was working with was just like incredible. Both of the founders of the company Run Games, which is behind Football Heroes, were veterans of the game industry. They'd worked on tons of games, like games I grew up with. So that was really cool to see firsthand. And then also I learned how to play football too, because I was never really into sports in high school. And that was how I learned the rules of the game. And I actually ended up playing football with my family after, and I felt like pretty good because I knew how to play.
That's awesome. So what about Yo?
Yeah. So after I moved from Los Angeles to San Francisco, I joined this company called Yo. So you may have seen it in the news. Yo was an app, or still is an app, that basically lets you just send Yo like a push notification to other people. So instead of something like Snapchat, where you might find your friend in your username list and then send them a picture, in Yo, you find them in the username list, and then you click their name, and they just get a thing that says Yo. And that's it. But that was really fun to work on because I joined the team when the app was being talked about a lot. So right when I joined, there were articles coming out in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and Time Magazine. So it was this crazy thing where it's a surprisingly simple app, but literally millions of people were using it. And brands wanted to partner with us to do stuff along those lines. So it was really fun because as like a relative novice, I had the opportunity to work with brands like the NBA and Motorola and people on those lines.
That's exciting. So it's really fascinating how you left high school. Do you want to tell us about how you ended up doing that, why you did it, how your parents or friends reacted to that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I've been programming for the majority of my life, and easily one of the biggest takeaways I've had from programming is that there are multiple ways to solve any given problem. If you want to put something like a button on the screen, you can do that in countless languages, but using countless different libraries. There's tons of ways to do it. And I think the same concept applies to life, and there are multiple ways to solve any given problem, even big things like getting an education. So when I was in high school, I was really disappointed because I didn't feel like I had the opportunity to focus on the things I wanted to. I was working at Run Games, and I was just cramming myself with classes as well. And it was this weird dichotomy where I would just push through school, and I just like felt horrible. I was like not happy at all. And then I'd go to this job, and it was just like everything I wanted to be doing with my life. And this was like every single day for a period of time. After doing that for long enough, I started asking the question, well, hey, I mean, I'm already working at a company. Could I do this full time? Because I'm very sure this is what I want to do, at least for now. And I decided to take that leap. There's a special test in California you can take called the CHESP. It's kind of like the GED, except you actually graduate from high school. So I'm technically a graduate of the state of California. And I took that test, and after that, I made the move. And I think it was really hard at first for both me and my parents. This was the first time I'd ever been away from home. I was like in this really foreign environment where everyone I knew was 4, 5, 6 years older than me. And especially at 16, like 4 years older is someone who's 20, which was like felt like an enormous age gap, even though it's not that far. So it was definitely challenging at first. But honestly, after those first 2 months when I did join Yo and I was working there, it was so clear that this is what I wanted to do with my life. So I ended up being really happy with the decision. My parents eventually ended up getting on board as well. Just I think for them at least, it was a big thing was just seeing how happy I was and how much I was learning.
Awesome. I really love your story. It's very inspirational, and I feel like I can relate to it in some way. But as you say that, I just recall the first time we met virtually. I think it was on a Wednesday. I remember I like skipped school, and then you weren't at school either. And then we started messaging, and we had a long conversation just about life in general and programming and all kinds of stuff. And yeah, it was really exciting to meet someone else that was kind of in the same position and was doing fascinating things. We both applied for the Thiel Fellowship, and we both didn't make it in the first time. And then now you made it in, right? You're getting 100K to work on your project. And yeah, do you want to tell us a little about the Thiel Fellowship and how that's going right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to address your first point first, I think community is just so important in everything you do. And in Hack Club, for example, we think community is one of the most important things when learning to program. So I'm totally with you. Like when we first met each other online, I thought that was awesome because you were one of very, very few people my age that I felt like I could identify with. And I was like, this person's like me. So I'm totally with you. I think like community is so huge, and I definitely felt that when I met you. For the fellowship, so there's this program called the Thiel Fellowship. It's ran by this guy called Peter Thiel. He's one of the people that started PayPal and Palantir. And what it is it's kind of like a college alternative. So he gives people $100,000 over the course of 2 years to not go to college and instead pursue something that they're working on in industry. Generally, this is starting a company or starting a nonprofit. So yeah, both of us applied to that. I ended up making it the second time I applied, which was last April. And it's been really, really great so far. And kind of on that community aspect too, I think easily the biggest thing that the fellowship has given me is a sense of community. Because it's like, holy shit, these are other people close to my age that share similar interests, that are way more accomplished than me, and I get to spend time and hang out with them. Like this is like my peer group. And I think that's been so huge.
Great. That's awesome. So why don't we address coding? Just how you got into it, best practices for beginners to get in, anything you'd recommend for people that want to get into programming. I know you're kind of the expert because the project that you're working on, Hack Club, you're effectively teaching students how to program. So I'd like to hear your perspective on just beginning to program and what you'd recommend to do.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I can call myself an expert. I mean, we're still learning stuff every day. But to start with my story, I got started coding when I was 7. All of my friends and I were really into this game called Club Penguin. And in Club Penguin, you walk around on the screen in this world of Penguin. You're a penguin, and there's other people who are penguins who are other 7-year-olds. And you just talk with each other and hang out. So one day at lunch, my friends and I were talking about Club Penguin, as it was like a pretty normal lunch. And we decided that we wanted to build a website about the game. We were going to post about new features. We were going to write about how to do the best job when you're playing the mini games inside of the game, and stuff along those lines. So that night, I went home and I went on Google and I typed in, how do I build a website? And I tried to take it from there. And over the next couple of years, I used a combination of Googling and just trying to build a bunch of different projects to learn the basics of programming. So when it comes to what is the best way to learn to program / how do you learn to program, my personal perspective is I think it's primarily a challenge of habit. As with anything, programming is a huge time investment, and it's important that you make that investment continuously and regularly. So what I mean by that is when I wanted to get better at programming, I was a freshman in high school at the time. What I decided to do was I was going to write code every single day. Didn't have to be a lot of code. It had to be at least one line of code every single day. And I basically kept a little calendar where I'd like check it off if I wrote code that day. And this forced me to turn coding into a habit. And just as a result of that, I ended up getting a lot better at programming over time. So what I'm trying to say by this is I recommend turning programming into a habit. One of the big things we do with Hack Clubs is they meet every week or twice a week. So you're kind of forced to continuously program if you're a member. And then the second thing is don't be afraid to fail. If you're building something like a website, go on Google, type in like, how do I add a drop-down menu, and try a bunch of different solutions until you find one that works. One of the cool things about programming is there is no cost to failing. If you're trying to build a rocket and it explodes, you lose money. If you try to build a website and it doesn't work, you don't lose anything. So keep trying things until they work, and you're just going to eventually get better over time as long as you keep doing it.
Great. And what about hackathon? Sorry. How has that affected you? Helped you learn in terms of networking and just working on projects in general?
Yeah, totally. So I really think it goes back to community with this one. When I grew up, I was learning to program. I was the only person I knew who programmed. The first time I ever met a professional coder or like someone else who wrote code was in 8th grade. So that was like 5 years after I got started. And it's really lonely and really isolating when you don't know anyone else that cares about what you care about. I literally thought I was the only person in California at my age that wrote code, which is obviously not true, but that's how like isolated I felt. So what's cool about hackathons is that they bring you this community. And for those of you who aren't familiar, hackathons are these like 24-hour coding festivals / marathons where a bunch of people come together and then they spend the next 24 hours, 36 hours, 46 hours writing code, generally building an app, a website, a game, or something else that's like way cooler. And then everyone at the end shows off what they built, and then prizes are awarded to the best hacks that the judges pick. So what's cool about hackathons is that they're generally like 50 people to 1,000 people or 2,000 people. And when you go to one, you're surrounded by like-minded peers, and it's impossible not to feel the community because the community is literally like physically around you. So I started going to hackathons. I went to my first one in 8th grade or 9th grade. And that actually got me my first job because it was the first time I ever met another programmer. I started talking with them, and it was just the most exciting thing to meet someone else that cared about what I cared about. And then they mentioned like, hey, Zach, do you want a job? And at the time I was like, oh my God, yes, of course I want a job. Mm-hmm. So they introduced me to the people that were running run games, which created Football Heroes. So it's a combination of community. It's a combination of like making the friends that are gonna help you in your professional life. And it's also just having fun too. There's something really exciting, really fun about just going to a separate, isolated environment, working on something that you would never normally work on, and then finishing it. It's super motivating. It's super fun. Yeah, I highly recommend anyone go to hackathons. Not anyone, but everyone go to hackathons.
Awesome. Okay. I just wanted to ask just about motivation and staying on top of the business you're working on or the projects. And when you did have school, how did you balance it with friends, activities, all this stuff? How did you prioritize your time? And are there any routines you have, habits? Because this is one of the hardest things for beginners to get into this is to, I guess, motivate themselves to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for me, it was two words: social isolation. But I don't recommend that to other people. Um, yeah, what I did was I basically like was doing two things with my time: school or work slash programming. Um, but there are so many other ways in that to learn to code. When it comes to prioritization, when it comes to like finding time to code, when it comes to keeping yourself doing it, I recommend making a commitment to yourself. What I did, as I mentioned, was literally said like, hey, I'm gonna write code every single day and I have to check off that calendar mark. And I did this, and I did it for about 600 days. And I recommend making some sort of similar commitment, maybe making a bet with a friend where it's like the first person to lose has to like pay the other person $100. I don't know what it has to be. But if you make some sort of commitment and keep it, it's inevitable that you're going to be a really good programmer. Really, like programming is a function of failures and time. The more time you spend, the more you're going to fail and the more you're going to learn. It's impossible not to be good at programming if you spend the time. And it's not very hard either. Programming itself is not very hard. It's mostly just the time invested.
I definitely agree with that. And in terms of commitment, a lot of the times what I did, I wasn't consciously thinking about it, but I made like a social commitment. I told someone that I'm gonna make this app or I'm gonna do something. And in the back of my head, I had to do it because I told people that I would. And if I didn't do it, I guess I'd feel bad. So I had to do it. And I think that's one of the best commitments just socially, at least for me. I don't know about you, but
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be different for everyone, but in the end, make some sort of commitment and create some sort of mechanism to force yourself to keep to it, whether it's social, whether it's monetary, whether it's something else.
right. So do you have any last thoughts or any last tips to say for beginners, someone that wants to get into programming, making apps, or living a similar lifestyle as you in terms of being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess if I had to leave off with like one message, I want to preface it by saying that this isn't just for people who also got started coding when they were 7, and this isn't just for people who already see themselves as a future programmer. This is for everyone. Coding is a superpower that affects us all. I think coding is quite possibly the most powerful skill that humanity has ever devised. If you look at the things that have changed the world over the past 100 years with technology, the internet, the personal computer, Unix, the Macintosh, Windows, all of these were built by teams of less than 100 people, and in fact, less than 40 people. And at any previous point in history, that would have never been possible because you would have just needed a larger workforce to create more impact. What's cool about technology is it lets an individual, someone like you, and actually like you, create something as powerful as the internet. And in fact, the internet as we know it today was largely created by a single person. So what I want to say is give it a try. I know this is part of a course. If you're already doing this, you're on the right track. Create some sort of commitment mechanism yourself and keep going. As I mentioned, programming is a function of time, so just make sure you spend the time. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Zach. I really appreciate the time that you spent taking out of your day. And I know you're a really busy guy. I mean, I had to book this interview 2 weeks in advance. So I really appreciate it, and thanks a lot.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm happy to. I'm always excited to help more people get started. So thanks for giving me the opportunity.
All right, great. Well, we'll stay in touch and talk to you later.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.